Yeah, my name's Jack. I work as a nurse. Also work as, I guess I would say my work is like as a man, as like a modern man. And I think of a lot of my work now as something where I obviously identify as a straight white man. And I kind of have to use that privilege to kind of teach a little bit of that. I'm doing a lot less nursing these days. I'm doing a lot more like how to teach about masculinity. I've got two things to say. Number one is I'm feeling really anxious. I normally present to 14 and 15-year-old people and they're yelling and screaming and swearing at me. So thank you for being quiet, that's great. But number two, I might just pause a couple of times, grab a bit of a drink of my coffee cup. I hope that's okay. And number two is my beautiful partner, Georgia, has requested that I put this as a voice memo. So is that okay if I record this session just on my phone? You can say hello, Georgia, if you want. But I've just got it on there because she wants to hear what I'm doing. But yeah, I want to start this session by just acknowledging the lands that we're on today, Yorta Yorta Nation. And for us to be on unceded lands, I think is really a time to pause and reflect on where we are, the storytelling that we're doing. And I was just talking about this at the dinner last night, but actually unlocking with respect to First Nation cultures around the world, this ancient technology of speaking and listening, and for us to actually be able to share stories. The thing about me is, in expanding a bit of my world and my work, I have a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies. One place that I work at is the Man Cave. If anyone's heard of that before, youth, men's mental health, character building, rite of passage work. I also work in there and do a little bit of stuff with Movember. I do my stuff with YZ. Also work at a large paediatric hospital that I'm not allowed to name, which is in Melbourne. You can shout it out if you know a large paediatric hospital. I also work for a large government department that's involved in schools. You might be able to think about that one as well. Can't name that. But I had a lot of early issues with masculinity. For me, I really resented being a man. And I think it was because I had really poor role models in like what it meant to be a man. Majority of my friends were people that loved banter, loved talking shit, and specifically could not hold a real conversation to save their lives. If I think about like the first time that I really had a negative sexual experience, I'm gonna give you two. It was the first time that I actually ever saw porn. A friend of mine, Jordan, he invited me, I'll name drop, why not? He invited me over to his house. He said, Jack, I've got something to show you. I was like, all right, cool, I'll go and watch this thing. And he takes me over to the computer and he says, oh yeah, we've just got to click on this link. I click on this link. And now me just hating the idea of clicking on a link for phishing and data security. Clicks on a link and I see the most abhorrent porn page that I've ever seen in my life. To this day. That was my first experience seeing a naked woman. I think of that, and about 2 weeks ago I had a young student come in and they had exactly the same experience with one of their friends. Social currency for that friend was showing him this material. And I think about how there's a lot of social currency in particularly young men adhering to the man box. And I think about the emotional literacy stuff that comes along with how young men operate in the world. I'm really lucky now that I get to I've recognized and acknowledged a lot of privilege that I hold, but now I'm able to kind of give a little bit. And in the work that I do with a lot of young people, it's actually just re-navigating stuff. I used to Google stuff like how to kiss a girl. I used to Google stuff like how to tell if a girl likes you. I used to Google stuff of like, how do I make sure I never lose a girlfriend? Those are the things that I looked on WikiHow. And young people are doing that still. I think the thing here is that we actually need to give people better roadmaps in what they're doing. The work is just because I used to be that guy and now I'm showing people that they don't have to be that. It's really important to actually frame up some stats. And this is stuff that's come from AIFS and Our Watch in the last couple of weeks. 1 in 4 young people confuse control with care. There's big statistics that talk about how young men won't let people leave arguments that they're having, because that is something that a bad partner would do. They can't regulate and see what a good partnership is. Something like 49% of young people under 17, 14 to 17-year-olds can't identify metrics for a healthy relationship. That's a lot. If I think of this middle stat, 1 in 3 men admit to intimate partner violence. That's between the ages of 18 and 30. And the last one is that boys are getting sex ed from porn. They're not getting it from schools. They're not getting it from parents. And they're getting it in ways that we can't supervise. We can't provide context, and we also can't provide that safety net. If we're thinking about how we can actually give them the education, we're seeing louder voices enter the space, and they're the least interested in keeping them safe. Versus little old me, my little old voice, I can only speak to a tiny room of boys at one time. Man box. Anyone heard of that before? I would love for you to yell out some things that you've heard of that come from the man box. What are things that stereotypically men are told we must do? Go for it. Don't cry. Awesome. What else?
Be a provider.
Ooh, be a provider. Nice. What else?
Eat red meat.
Eat red meat. Eat red meat. Dominate. Have control. Be sexually active. Hold authority.
80-20.
80-20. Be a high-value man. Attract high-value women. These are the things that are in the box. And to step out of that box is to be something like a simp, virgin, gay, no money, soft, no control, no authority. You're being emotional. There's a third tier to the man box, and it's the policing of the man box. It happens from peers, happens from society, social media, from us and the way that we educate. And it's those things where occasionally we reinforce factors that sit in the box as being over and above stuff that sits out of the box. There's a statistic that I want to share with you here. And it's something that I got from the Jesuit Social Services and Women in Health in the Southeast, WISE. Had a really good PD with them. There's a few plenary people in here. Barb, you said you're an associate professor. Cool. I'm going to throw in a word called quintiles. I believe it's how you separate data into fifths. Run with me, right? Quintile 5 would represent men who most associate with stuff in the box. Those are people who hold those beliefs as gospel. Quintile 5 showed that 55% of those men between 18 and 30 actively had sexually harassed a woman in the last month. So I'll say that again. Men who adhere to that box in the highest degree, in the last month, 55% of them had sexually harassed a woman. Quintile 1, which would be the least adherence, was only 1.6%. In the man box, if we could get young men just to step out of the box a little bit, quintile 4, directly below quintile 5, instead of being 55% of men sexually harassing women in the last month, it went all the way down to 13%. And if we're looking at the difference here, we're not trying to get men to fully be out of the box. Like, some of these things are good, like providing for the family, good. Being able to be strong and tough, good. Not being able to show emotion, very bad. Being transphobic, very bad. Being someone who constantly puts other people down, very bad. If we could just get people to step out a little bit and see that it's actually not like a war zone out here, we get to see young men step into themselves. In that, when we find young men trying to find those spaces, unfortunately, they're finding echo chambers. I think of the work that Chanel Contos has done with Teachers' Consent, God bless. She talks about how all of the social movement that she's had was able to be conduited into something positive. And they're able to get consent law and stuff like that into policy in New South Wales. Awesome outcome. What about boys? Boys go online. Heaps of TikTok alpha males. We're seeing them fall into dominant voices with no empathy, shame ruling, these red-pilled advice forums. We're also seeing that people are competing for status and to be more powerful. And I think of my friend Jordan, who showed me this website. Like, that was a way for him to assert a bit of control and say, I've had this experience over and above you. I'm a bit more of a man. At 12 years old. This is stuff where if we don't get boys finding safe spaces, they're going to settle for loud ones. And if you've been online recently, there's a lot of loud spaces. I have to reset my algorithm very regularly, and unfortunately, I still get this stuff now. I was trying to do this thing at the dinner last night where I went through my Instagram feed, and you find it. You find it all the time. If we're getting young men who are coming in and we're going into these echo chambers, they're going in without emotional literacy. And emotional language is not something that's just fluff. It's actually a survival thing. We think about First Nation cultures being able to share stories and have this social technology which has lasted hundreds of thousands of years, being speaking, listening, recording information. That's something that we're sort of missing in this, like, if you want to call it like post-industrial age, if you want to call it like the post-internet period, this new sort of shift that we're going into, we're finding that these emotions are something that are not being identified, sat with, or even being asked, hey, how do you feel? In that, I want to actually emphasize the fact that we have proof we can build this skill. I'm not here as a mouthpiece for the man cave, but 77% of boys felt more able to express emotions post a workshop. That's enormous. And all that was slowing down, pausing, and asking a boy how they really felt. It mattered a lot who asked it mattered a lot the environment, and it mattered a lot that they weren't in that typical school setting for that day, for that boy. And some stepped in, and some didn't. But we find that when we actually get most boys in there, there's something that I wrote down here, which was most boys that I meet, they don't say that they're ashamed. They say like they're dead inside. They say they're pissed off. They just shut down completely. And I find that they'll tell me they want to kill themselves because they failed an assignment, when actually the language there might be just, I feel worthless. Language there might be something like, I'm embarrassed. And language there might be something like, I am not enough. I've had to sit with those feelings for a long time, and like I'm starting to get out of it now. We had a really good discussion last night about some of the work that I'm doing at the moment. It's like a constant thing. I've got heaps of skills, but I also need to build myself and like my character. When we're talking about the impacts of masculinity, it's not neutral, and it really has a rippled effect. We're talking about like this first ripple. If you can't name your own emotions, how is it that we can actually respect someone else's? If we're talking about the second ripple, I've got connection with others, but it feels unsafe. So then why would I ever risk actually going in and building into that connection and trusting in that connection? I'm going to back out of that. And then it's the girl's burden. Really good movement online called Women Are Not Your Therapy. And ripple 3 is that it's not just a personal thing, it becomes like a societal construct, becomes structural. Patriarchy. Cool. I think of this stuff and I think of like where we escalate, and I think of like young boys that come to me with like porn-induced erectile dysfunction. I think of boys that come to me and they talk about porn experiences like I've had. And I think of these young men who are just, unfortunately, getting to this place, I want to say, where it's not actually working. The ripples are not just hitting them, it's hitting everyone around them. What I'd love for you to do, people in the breakout room as well, I'd love for you to shut your eyes. If you feel comfortable, if you feel safe. And I ask you a very specific question. And it's this. Last week, what was going on for you? How'd you feel? I don't want you to answer with tired. I don't want you to answer with fine. I don't want you to answer with good. I actually want you to like answer that question for yourself. Slowly return to the room and think about those emotions being how comfortable you are actually saying it aloud. I think of last week and I felt very worthless. I'm saying that aloud, to you. The emotions that came up for you sometimes are really difficult and you might not feel that you're able to say them aloud, but when we get to a point of being comfortable saying that we're ashamed, we're lonely, we're vulnerable, that's where the growth's actually coming. I need to sit with emotions because they're serving me. And the biggest thing here is I'm underscoring the fact that boys are experiencing this all the time because they don't get the opportunity where I come in and say, hey, how you feeling? And I can catch them at the right moment. Because unfortunately, they're getting serotonin hits from this, serotonin hits from vapes, and they're just living in a world where they are constantly occupied, not sitting with themselves. Where boys fear to feel is kind of what I just talked to. But that emotion you weren't taught to sit with, that's something that we can talk about being really important in the consent conversation. If you can't navigate rejection, if you've never had shame and sat with it, you can't pause a hookup if you don't recognize anxiety. You can't hear no if you've never heard it from yourself, and you can't offer safety if you've never felt vulnerable. I think of this experience I had with my ex-girlfriend Matilda. I was 18, we went to a party, and I'd looked on these WikiHows of like how to kiss a girl, embarrassing. How to French kiss a girl, very embarrassing. Ugh, do you recall that? Great. I'm at this party, right? Huge crowd sort of there. It's like an 18th, there's like 100, 200 people. And I go in and say to Matilda, I think I'd like to kiss you tonight, but I don't really want to do it in front of other people. I feel a bit awkward. She was like, okay. We go in. I don't dance. I'm a little bit introverted. We finish up the night. Everyone's outside. And kind of like in a weird way, this circle formed around us. And she grabbed me and gave me a really big kiss. I tried pulling back. Had no luck. I tried getting away, physically stepping away, like pushing her off, and she just kept coming towards me. And I think of that story a lot in like how it's formed my relationship with relationships. But like I put in a boundary and it was crossed. And whether that's like perpetrated in a way that she just didn't understand the severity of, but I think of that a lot with like, I wasn't able to navigate that pause in the hookup because like I'd never sat with how anxious I was actually feeling about it. And I can't control what she was doing, but I know for me, in that moment, I needed to really communicate how awkward I felt in that moment. And I could have seen the signs a little bit earlier. If I'm thinking about young people here, it's not about remaking these boys, it's actually like remaking a bit of masculinity. And there's a point here where we had a really good session, essentially at a sex ed workshop I was running, co-gendered space, thank you Zara. And specifically, we had boys and the girls in the session. Boys named, they were being really quiet during the day, but they named that they were scared of being falsely accused. And I asked the girls, like, what's that like to hear? They said, didn't realize. Cool. Hey girls, what are you scared of? Instantly, without like a pause, scared of being hurt, scared of being raped, scared of having my boundaries pushed and ignored. And there was like silence. And I asked the boys, like, how'd that feel to hear? Didn't realize it was like that. Awesome. Out of the silence, I just stepped back. Sometimes I just like for there to be a bit of silence, if you haven't noticed that today. And this wonderful little boy just come in and he's like, what would it take for us to feel safe? Us to feel safe. And a lot of that is just, we need to bring questions in. We need to actually practice this reflection piece. And we need to tell people that pushing through boundaries for boys is not because they're cruel, it's because they've never had someone to teach them how to pause. They've never had the ability for adults to facilitate a space because their spaces are facilitated by online environments. If we're talking about how boys and men can be the fix, there was something here where, again, we had a sex ed workshop and we had two boys who were like pretty quiet during the day. And this one guy who was giving a lot of shit towards the girls. Female teacher as well. I was in the room. Before I could even step up to like correct the behavior, we had these two really quiet boys actually come in and they didn't punish him, but that was the direct quote. Bro, I could do the accent, but bro, that's not it. Think about if someone said that about your girlfriend, man. And there was like a pause. It was like a teaching moment from the peer. The session didn't fall apart, it leveled up. The policing of the man box changed for that group of people. The issue is that when they step out of that classroom, the policing of the man box again is going to be impacted on them. Really big thing from me here is I'm acknowledging that I'm a white male standing out the front of a majority female room. Something here that's important to name is like women have been doing the work for a very long time. Very long time. And you're doing a very good job at it. But something that I think we need to push more is men in HEAL. Has anyone heard of that before? Women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Men in HEAL is, thank you Ash, health, education. L is for literature. A is for art, I believe. Thank you. Co-facilitation. There's something like 3 times more jobs in HEAL than there is in STEM. If we think about actually promoting men to go into those HEAL jobs, not many, just a couple, we could actually get men being there as pillars, characters. There was a man cave study that came out, and it was like preliminary data. They did a little data set. It was my friend DJ and Jed. And they came in with this thing that of their metrics that they found, the biggest predictor for pro-social behaviour and lack of improved opinion for women was actually having positive male role models. That was like the biggest pro-social factor that they found in their study. The absence of a role model found to be something that would worsen young men's opinion of women and would also cause them to feel in themselves worse. The bit that I want to give you here, which I haven't named on any of the slides, is for me, emotional literacy is an absolute pillar of sexual and reproductive health. Without emotional literacy taught to our young people, we can't do and build upon poor foundations. That's the piece I want to give you. The steps that you can do is talk to young people around you. The steps that you can also make is to make sure that when you have the opportunity to talk to young people, ask them how they're going. Give them the opportunity to answer, and give them the opportunity to explore their internal world, because it might be for the first time they've ever done it. That's sort of the conclusion of what I was going to say. Thank you so much.